Hello students, in the previous lesson we have discussed about punctuation and why is it necessary to punctuate, and also we have learned few rules whether when to capitalize. Today we are going to learn when or how or where to use a full stop and a comma. First, let us look at some of the rules where to use a full stop or when to use a full stop. The first rule is a very basic rule which we all have been studying since our schooling, which is we place a full stop at the end of every sentence, right? I have given an example here. I was at home early yesterday. I ended that sentence with a full stop. This is a basic rule for punctuation, whether when to end it with a full stop. As soon as we end with a full stop, we give a space and again start off with a capital letter. That is what we have learned in capitalization. So this is the first rule for placing a full stop. When we look at the second rule, full stop is used to indicate an abbreviation. For example, I went to school at 8 a.m. A.M. is, you know, written with full stops there or dots there. The next example is tomorrow I would like to be on leave, that is on 7th November 2020. Okay, so I have used a short form here, that is as a short form IE, and that's the reason I have used a dot. Okay, so in the same way I have some more examples written here. 5 p.m. just as I have used in AM, I have used for PM. Then Professor Smith. Instead of writing a huge complete name, like complete designation as professor, I have shortened and written professor by writing PROF and a dot or a full stop, which is designation of Mr. Smith. Even when I write Mr. or Mrs., we just write M capital and R and then place a dot and then maybe we can say Mr. Jones. Okay, can somebody guess what SGT is? SGT Jones, which is Sergeant Jones. Alright, then we have George W. Bush. George W. Bush is, W is the surname. Again, we placed a full stop there after writing Bush. Okay, so when we are using our surnames or when we are writing our designation, for example, doctor, after writing DR, we place a full stop. Mr., Miss, etc. Whatever we are writing, whenever we are addressing someone with some title, we end that title with a full stop and then give a space and write the name of the person. So this was the second rule. When we look at the third basic rule, in numbers we use full stop. For example, retail sales fell by 10.25% in October. So 10.25. Point is again a full stop. These are the basic things what we use. Well, let us look at where to place a comma. Before we look at it, let us just look at some of the examples which are given here, which are somewhat hilarious to look at. Okay, maybe we can just look at this. Persistent cough, EMS, post OP left shoulder, unable to eat, diarrhea. This is really unimaginable to read or to listen to. What should come here is a comma, right? It's really required. If not, it would really sound so disgusting to listen to this, right? Forgetfulness, headache. There is nothing which would be like forgetfulness, headache, right? So there should be a comma even here. Alright, so in the same way, maybe we can see fall, RT, arm injury, and other things where we understand that what is required. A comma is really required here. Alright, in the same way, one day a professor just went and wrote a sentence on the board. A sentence said, the sentence went this way: a woman without her man is nothing. This was written on the board, and all the men or all the boys in the class, they wrote it just like this. Okay, a woman without her man is nothing. All right, this was the way men wrote. Okay, but whereas when we look at how girls or maybe women wrote in the class, a woman without her man is nothing. Okay, so maybe one sentence could be interpreted in two different ways. So that is the main reason we have to understand how punctuation is really powerful. It changes meanings, it can create misunderstandings, and it can even create quarrels among us. So we have to be really careful. Alright, so when we look at the rules of when or where to place comma, the symbol for comma is already there. So the first rule for comma is why to use a comma. It separates words, phrases, or clauses in a list or in a sentence. Okay, so the example is here: I search for her at home, in the office, and at school. Okay, so there are three phrases which we try to separate. So for this, we happen to use a comma. If we, alright, we'll look at the next rule whether to use a comma or and all. We have another rule for it. Alright, so look at the second rule: enclose non-essential details. So the example goes this way: my father, who is an officer, was not at home. Okay, whether we don't even have to know whether he was at home or whether he was at office, but just when we are enclosing the non-essential details, also when we are trying to include it in a sentence, we just try to give a pause. We try to give a pause when we are enclosing the non-essential details. Alright, look at this third rule. Comma is used to separate two independent clauses connected by conjunctions such as and, but, for, or, so, and yet. There are many other conjunctions which could be used. So here, instead of and, we can even use what? A comma. But because this is the last phrase or a clause in this sentence, we used and. Alright, so let us look at this example here which I have mentioned. I went to her office, but she wasn't there. Okay, so we can even use a comma here and write and. And even over here, when I have used the first part of the independent clause, I went to her office, we can end it with a comma there, and then we can continue it with a conjunction because it's connected by conjunctions. Alright. The next rule: between adjectives, more than one adjective can be separated with a comma. For example, when I'm describing a particular person here, just as in the example, the young, well-dressed, well-educated woman was clearly discriminated against. Okay, so here we could see three total adjectives. So that is the reason I had to separate them with a comma. Alright. Even when there is a list, we can just go ahead with a comma then. Okay, so let's look at the last rule for a comma. to set off introductory clauses from a main clause. There are certain sentences where we have particular important part in a sentence and the rest of it could not be as much as important as the first part of it. So the main part could be separated by a comma from the other part of the sentence. For example, feeling exhausted. I decided to go home back or go back home. Alright, so feeling exhausted is the main clause what we see here in this sentence. I hope these comma rules were clear to all of you. Hope to see you in the next class where we are going to discuss about question mark and exclamation mark. Thank you.